The president and first lady hosted Kenyan President William Ruto last week, solidifying one of the United States' most important relationships in the fast-growing continent in the world. At the arrival ceremony on the South Lawn, President Biden talked about how he had witnessed the evolving partnership between the United States and Kenya.
We're united by the same democratic values. I saw this during my first trip to Kenya as a young senator at the height of the Cold War, and watched our governments stand as one and prevail against communism. I saw it when I returned years later as vice president and spoke to students committed to upholding the principles of transparency, justice, and accountability that lie at the heart of our democracies. And I see it every day as president, as our two proud democracies continue to draw from the power of the people and the strength of our diversity to write the next chapter in our partnership. Together, the United States and Kenya are working to deliver on the challenges that matter most to our people's lives: health security, economic security, cyber security, and climate security. Let me close with this. We stand at an inflection point in history where the decisions we make now will determine the course of our future for decades to come. Today, I'm as optimistic and hopeful as I was those years ago when Kenya patriots raised that new flag high in that midnight sky. Because Kenya and the United States stand together, committed to each other, committed to our people, and committed to building a better world, one of greater opportunity, dignity, security, and liberty for all Americans, for all Kenyans.
I want to thank President Biden for extending an invitation to me to undertake this state visit, a sign of friendship and partnership and collaboration between two countries that share common values, values of freedom, democracy, rule of law, equality, and inclusivity. We are a very proud democratic nation. And today, as we celebrate our past, we are optimistic about our future.
The state dinner Thursday night was attended by several notable guests, including former President Barack Obama, whose father was from Kenya. The event marked the 60th anniversary of U.S.-Kenyan diplomatic relations and is the first state dinner for an African leader in 15 years. It's been even longer since an African leader has addressed a joint session of Congress. The last time was nearly 20 years ago, in 2006, when Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf spoke before both chambers. House Democrats have criticized Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson for turning down their request to give Kenyan President Ruto this honor. In a May 15th letter to Speaker Johnson, Democratic members said, foreign adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran are working tirelessly to subvert America's alliances, particularly in Africa. Failing to offer the same invitation to President Ruto risks sending the message that African partnerships are less valued by Congress. No one is working harder than Russian President Vladimir Putin to disrupt Africa's relationship with the West. A recent report from the Royal United Services Institute think tank details how the rebranded Wagner Group in Africa is working to consolidate and expand Moscow's strategic relationships across the continent through guarantees of regime security and geopolitical protection in exchange for lucrative mining concessions. Kenya is also helping the United States confront the spiraling gang violence that has overwhelmed the government in Haiti. Kenya has agreed to lead a multinational peace force in that country, just 600 miles south of the United States, with the first troops expected to arrive there in 3 weeks. Joining us now is Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. Congresswoman, it's an honor to have you here. Let's talk about how important it was for President Biden to show not only the honorifics to Ruto, but also to talk about how those strategic alliances between the United States and Kenya are actually going to maybe end run those moves by Iran, Russia, and China.
Thank you so much for covering this, Katie, and thank you for having me. First of all, let me just say that I am deeply grateful that the president and Biden-Harris administration recognizes the importance of Africa as a continent, specifically Kenya. And in fact, I was privileged to be at the state dinner and then at the lunch the next day and listen to President Ruto and the president and our Secretary of State talk about the importance of this strategic alliance, but not only for counterterrorism measures or for our own national security, but also to develop these partnerships because we have a historic tie to the continent of Africa, first of all, with millions of African Americans here in the United States who are a natural partner with Africa, specifically Kenya, but also we have alliances as it relates to trade, development, healthcare that benefit both continents, both countries, Kenya and the United States. And so I was very pleased that the president and the vice president got it. Our administration understands this, and I hope that the path forward shows some successes and some follow-up to the discussions that we're having.
Yeah, and Congresswoman, another important component of Biden meeting and having and hosting President Ruto from Kenya is the fact that there's more than $1 billion in startup and tech and commerce companies that have actually invested in Kenya. Talk a little bit about why it's important for the United States in terms of its development of the relationships financially, like how that benefits us as well by maintaining these relationships with Kenya.
Sure. My district is right next to Silicon Valley. It's a district which it includes many tech individuals, tech companies that want to do business in Kenya. And it benefits both the United States, California, my district. It benefits the people of our own country because what we're doing is investing in technology in a continent of young people. I think the average age of the population on the continent is about 19 years old. And these partnerships will lead to jobs for Kenyans, business opportunities for Kenyans, as well as for Americans. And so this is an extremely important investment. And I just have to say, I was very disappointed that the speaker did not invite the president to speak to a joint session of Congress. Come on, this Congress alone, we've had the president of Israel, we've had the prime minister of India and Japan, and President Ruto and the people of Kenya deserve that respect. And so it's been, as you said, since 2006. And I think that that was a missed opportunity for members of Congress. But I want to thank all of the 11 members of Congress who signed my letter. Congressman, the ranking member, Gregory Meeks, of the Foreign Affairs Committee led a letter with myself, as well as the chair of the Black Caucus, to tell the speaker that this was an important moment that we should not miss. Yeah,
Congressman, I apologize if I interrupted. What was the excuse given by Mike Johnson?
Well, what we were told was that, and what he said, I believe, publicly was that it was a scheduling issue. But it's like the MAGA extremist Republicans in the House always find time to do nothing with the bills that they bring forward, which really don't do much to address the issues and the aspirations and the lives of Americans as well as people throughout the world. So they find time for their do nothing agenda, yet they can't find time for a world leader to come speak to a joint session of Congress, which to me was outrageous.
Especially from a country like Kenya. Congresswoman Barbara Lee, thank you so much for being here and for your insight on this important topic. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for covering this.
Yes. This is how Black women are dying. That's what our next guest, Caitlin Joshua, told reporters before Louisiana's Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed into law a bill that adds mifepristone and misoprostol, two medications commonly used to end a pregnancy, to the state's list of controlled dangerous substances. Both drugs are often used during miscarriages. And in 2022, Caitlin Joshua, a Louisiana mother, was turned away from 2 emergency rooms and denied treatment after experiencing a miscarriage because Louisiana had enacted a near total abortion ban following the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Caitlin Joshua is now campaigning on behalf of President Biden to remind people across the country that Donald Trump is responsible for the attacks on reproductive rights. Since the fall of Roe, Trump has taken credit for ending the constitutional right to an abortion. And the Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices don't want to stop there. In his concurring opinion to the court's decision to overturn Roe, Justice Thomas wrote, quote, "In future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold." That's Griswold versus Connecticut, a 1965 Supreme Court decision that protects the rights of married couples to use contraceptives. In April, Donald Trump thanked the justices who overturned the individual's freedom to make their own health care decisions.
I want to thank the 6 justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Neil Gorsuch, incredible people, for having the courage to allow this long-term, hard-fought battle to finally end.
Joining us now is Caitlin Joshua. She was turned away from 2 emergency rooms while experiencing a miscarriage in Louisiana in 2022. And she was denied treatment because of that state's abortion ban. Caitlin, when I read your story, I was struck by how much fear and pain that you went through to be able to just get through an experience that if medical providers felt comfortable because they felt like they weren't going to be criminally prosecuted for helping you and giving you the medical care you needed, you would have been okay. I had a miscarriage. I was hemorrhaging. They gave me a DNC. That was an option for you if it had been somewhere other than Louisiana. Talk about why it's so important for people to understand that you, me, and countless others, that this is healthcare, that this is something that's really important so that you don't have to go through this again.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me tonight. I think the issue that we're talking about today is so extremely important. And it's important for women across this country to understand that while you may think you're in a safe state or you're in a safe place, or maybe you're like me and you live under an abortion ban, but all that to say, it is very important for us to get to the polls this fall and fight for these issues on a federal level because our states are not doing the work to protect us as women and in childbearing years. It's extremely important for folks to understand that I myself do not want anybody else to experience what I experienced as a woman living in South Louisiana under an abortion ban, which has certainly made an impact on our maternal health care rates. We've seen studies come out talking about how women, 1 in 3 women in the South during childbirth, postpartum period, or during childbirth, postpartum period, or just in the childbearing years. Am I able to start that over? I'm sorry.
Caitlin, you said something that really was jaw drop. You said folks need answers, not prayers, and that's exactly what I was looking for in that moment. You had to go from an ER to another ER. You're bleeding. You're running the risk of becoming septic. I mean, there's so much going on, and all you wanted was medical answers. You didn't want somebody to pray for you to get better. You needed answers, and yet people were terrified. People in the medical profession were terrified to give you this information. Why is it that a red state like Louisiana, with its very confusing laws that create fear in medical professionals, why is it so important then for people to understand that just because they don't have a red state right now that has a near ban, that because of Dobbs, now the states make these decisions all on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most valid point to bring up when it comes to my story, helping folks understand. You may think at abortion rights, when folks talk about the word abortion, I think a lot of times their minds run to this idea of women who do not want children or do not want to expand their families. But a lot of times we're looking at states that have an abortion ban. We're dealing with situations where a lot of us do want children, or a lot of us are trying to expand our families. But because of the intersectionality between maternal health care and the abortion bans in our state, it's impossible for us to thrive in a way that's safe and effective for a lot of us that are wanting to grow our families. When we talk about the red tape that abortion bans bring, not only are we looking at the lives of women being lost, but we're not seeing us saving any more babies. And I think that a lot of times the abortion bans speak to this potential, or this right to life or pro-life movement that speaks to the potential of growing families and in a healthy way and making sure that babies are safe. But right now we're looking at exponential and disproportionate numbers of women that are losing their lives as a result of these bans. And again, to your point, we're talking about about, right now states are safe or have this idea that, you can go to Nevada or you can go to other states that have full access to maternal health care or abortion care. But what we know is very important. Bans do not work anywhere. And if there's a ban anywhere in this country, none of us are safe. So it's important for us to throw this back to our federal government, allow for President Biden and Vice President Harris to do a good job, and on the second term being able to just instate laws that protect everyone in this country, not just some in certain states.
Yeah, and to your point, Donald Trump has said that he wants to enact a federal ban. So, forget the Supreme Court saying it becomes a state thing. He wants a federal ban if he gets elected back into the Oval Office. Caitlin Joshua, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm always speechless, but I'm always inspired by the courage of you and others that are willing to share what your journey was, how painful it was, so that we all understand that there are people, there are faces to the stories. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Spain today, meeting with officials there to secure more military aid. After more than 820 days of war, President Zelensky says that Vladimir Putin's army is still dropping around 3,000 bombs on his nation's sovereign territory every month. On Saturday, Russian strikes hit a shopping center in Kharkiv, a cowardly move hitting what is clearly a civilian target. The attack, captured here by security cameras, killed at least 18 people, local officials confirmed today. Multiple reports citing police say that a 12-year-old girl was among the dead. Dozens of people were injured in the brutal assault. And yesterday, President Zelensky released a new video in English, standing inside what remains of a Ukrainian publishing house that was destroyed by Russian bombs. He talks about the constant attacks from Putin that people in Kharkiv are facing and asks the world to continue helping Ukraine in this illegal war.
We all know who are we dealing with. Russia is run by men who want to make it a norm, burning lives, destroying cities and villages, dividing people and erasing national borders through war. There is no nation that can stop such war alone. Unaided world leaders' engagement is needed. I'm now in Kharkiv, a city in the east of Ukraine, and unfortunately very close to the border on Russia. What does it mean for Kharkiv? A third year of constant terror. More than 1 million of people in this city. And every night and every day, Russian army is shelling the city, mostly with S-300 missiles, just like all other Russian strikes on hundreds of other of our cities and villages. Some of them, once booming with life, are now burned to ashes, people less. A burnt out emptiness, the most horrible consequence of war. War that we didn't want in Ukraine, that we haven't provoked, and in which Ukraine is defending itself from Russian attempts to seize our resources and territories and destroy our national identity.
In the same video, President Zelensky asked President Biden and President Xi Jinping of China to join delegations from dozens of other nations at a peace summit in Switzerland next month. It's the kind of invitation President Zelensky knows he could never make if Donald Trump is allowed back in the Oval Office. Trump was, of course, impeached for trying to extort Ukraine to go after Joe Biden. And last week, Trump took the unprecedented move to insert himself, a presidential candidate with a professed adoration of Vladimir Putin, into the very delicate situation involving Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who is currently held in a Russian prison. Trump claims that he and he alone can convince his favorite autocrat to release the jailed journalist, posting, quote, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, will do that for me, but not for anyone else, and we will be paying nothing. What's the quid pro quo for that? Joining us now is Michael McFaul, who served as the U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2012 to 2014. He is also an MSNBC international affairs analyst. Ambassador, I'm grateful for you to be here. I want to start with what Trump posted about Evan Gershkovich. The idea that Trump is saying that he and he alone has the keys to the cell, literally, to get an American home from Russia. And yet he's not doing it right now. He has the power and the ability to do it. So he's using Evan's life as a pawn. Talk a little bit about why, A, Putin would never agree to this, and B, why it's suddenly okay for Trump to decide to use that as some type of power play.
Well, first, you're absolutely right. If he has that power, he should use it now. Why not? He could call his friend Vladimir and say, let Evan out. And he could show to the world that he has this close, special, personal relationship with Putin that he's always bragging about, that he's always claiming would be in America's national interest. So he should do that now. There's no reason to wait till January should he win the presidential election. But second, it won't happen because he does not have that kind of power and influence over Vladimir Putin, despite what he brags about claiming that he can do. He didn't think about it. He was president for 4 years. He met with Mr. Putin. They had a summit in Helsinki. They had meetings from time to time. But try to think about what concrete national security interests were achieved for the United States of America because of that close personal relationship. I literally can't think of a single thing.
The other thing that I want to talk about is the fact that Russia has launched a multi-front invasion of Ukraine. The Baltic states have actually said that if Russia makes some type of significant breakthrough in terms of that multi-front invasion, that they're actually contemplating sending troops into Ukraine to aid Ukraine without waiting for NATO to give them the green light. There's also an issue, Ambassador, about the fact that the United States and other countries have said that their weapons cannot be used to actually be entering into Russian territory. But aren't we at the point now where a lot of this is just conversation and it's time for people to actually take action to help the Ukrainians?
Yes. There is a lot of anxiety in Ukraine. I talk to Ukrainians every day. There's a lot of anxiety in the region, as you just rightly noted. I was in Lithuania a few months ago, and there's extreme anxiety that if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he will try to threaten the states of NATO, especially if Mr. Trump is president, to test to see if we will stand by our allies. I don't think it would be prudent for NATO countries to send soldiers to Ukraine. I do think, however, it is extremely prudent and long overdue for the Biden administration and the rest of the NATO allies to give President Zelensky the license to use the weapons that we have transferred to him to defend Ukraine, especially in Kharkiv that you have been showing in your show already. Kharkiv is right on the border of Russia. Russians are shooting into Kharkiv from Russian territory, and the Ukrainians cannot fire back. They should have the right to self-defense. That's a concept embedded in the United Nations Charter. It's a pretty American idea, too, the right to self-defense. I think the time is now, because if we let Vladimir Putin succeed around Kharkiv, that is the beginning of threatening our NATO allies in the neighborhood there.
And that's really the important message, right? I think people kind of lose sight sometimes in terms of why it's so important for the United States to aid Ukraine. It's not just Ukraine, it's the other countries that are not only in Europe, but frankly, the rest of the world if Putin remains unchecked. And so do you think that that meeting in Switzerland, that you're actually going to see somebody like Biden and Xi Jinping actually show up for something like that?
Well, your first point could not be stressed more. There's somehow this idea that Putin just wants a little bit of territory and then he's going to relax. There's no reason to believe that. He didn't stop in 2008 after invading Georgia. He didn't stop after 2014 when he annexed Crimea as part of Ukraine. There's no reason he will stop unless he is stopped on the battlefield. And it is in America's national interest to allow the Ukrainians to stop him in Ukraine so that we are not dragged into a war when we have to defend our allies in NATO. So that nothing could be more important in terms of our national interests. With respect to the peace conference, I hope that all national leaders will go. I'm not optimistic that Xi Jinping will show up or even President Biden, but I think it's an important meeting because it will demonstrate that Zelensky is serious about peace. Putin, so far, is not.
We'll have to wait and see. Ambassador Michael McFaul, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.